Hi, welcome to the show. Today our local matter is transportation, public county transportation, bus service, DialARide, and I have some great guests with me today to talk about that. I have with me John Isaacs, a member of John Francis, a member of Friends of the Bus. Thanks for being here, John. And Cynthia Thompson, our county transit manager. Thank you. Well, let's start with you, John. Tell us a little bit about Friends of the Bus and your experience there and what they're about.
Well, Friends of the Bus is just a group of people from Yamhill County, primarily McMinnville, but from other places as well. And we're interested in improving the bus service as we see it here. There's, as Cynthia will probably explain, there's new contract being considered now. And we would like to see some considerable changes in the bus service here. Friends of mine, for instance, who have ridden the bus for many years say that, up until 5 years ago, it was a lot more crowded. A lot more people used the bus. It was a lot more user-friendly, shall we say. And now with the new system where people get in McMinnville at any rate, people get dropped off just on the highway, etc., people find it a lot less useful. And I think it's important to realize that a good bus service, a bus service that stops at different stores and is useful to people, really does make a town livelier and a much better place to live.
Well, great. Thank you. I know that you've been making a difference, and people are hearing you. Our County Commissioner, Rick Olson, has attended Friends of the Bus meetings. I've been there, and I see Cynthia and the people there responding. And Cynthia, let's just back up a little bit and tell us about where you were before you came to be manager here.
I've spent about almost 30 years in public transportation. I started in Southern Oregon and then was as an employee transit manager, and then worked for Wilsonville for a number of years, and then the city of Portland. And then I started my own business and have been helping. My heart and my passion is really about community transit, smaller communities, typically bus systems with 20 or 30 buses and budgets of around $2 to $4 million. That's where I've spent most of my career, and I enjoy it, and I know how valuable it is. Just like John said, it's it's a lifeline for people, and I enjoyed it. When I worked at the city of Portland, I was the manager of their options division, which was promoting all alternative forms: biking, walking, carpooling, transit. And I actually missed sort of the day-to-day of managing a bus system. Here in Yamhill County, we have a contract, so I don't hire drivers and deal with the day-to-day, but it's I'm still close to the system, and hopefully my goal is that wherever I work, that I'll be able to make the bus system better and work better for the people who use it.
Well, we've got some great opportunity now. We've got a study being done, there's surveys, there's a plan being implemented, being formed and soon to be implemented, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. To understand better where we are, I think there's some history maybe we should just talk about. What John mentions that bus service was different 5 years ago. Would you tell us a little bit about how it was set up differently and how it's changed?
I've been here since 2015, so I wasn't here when it was under the other structure, but my understanding is that it used to be operated by two nonprofits. There was Chehalem Valley Transit in Newburgh and YCAP in McMinnville. And then I believe when the district was formed in 2007, the county oversaw those two contracts with those two nonprofits. And then I'm not really sure what happened, but during that time frame, it was decided that the county wanted to do request for proposal, and they got proposals from a number of private vendors to bring in professional transit company to manage the system and run the system. And so that's when First Transit was selected as the vendor, and they started providing the service in 2012.
And about that time, there was some change in how service was allocated. Less, perhaps, locally and more out into the region.
I believe the goal, what I've been told by stakeholders and folks who've been familiar with the system for a long time, that they one of the goals was to really connect Yamhill County with surrounding areas, and so people could get to work and medical appointments and that sort of thing. So the bus service reaches pretty. I was surprised when I got here how far reaching it is. We have routes that go to Salem, to Grand Ronde, to Hillsborough, and to Tiger Transit Center. And then there's a local bus service in Newburgh and local bus service in McMinnville. And so it changed. I think actually there were, I don't know about the number of hours of service, whether it's more before or after, but the ridership changed depending on, like local ridership maybe went down, but commuter ridership went up. So
Now, also, is the DialARide program, and are there other programs that help move people around?
yes,
besides
I
the
didn't
bus
mention
service?
the demand response. There are two types of demand response service right now. There's a required service that's the ADA Paratransit service, which is a door-to-door service that's offered in Newburgh and McMinnville, and it's required by the federal government that people who can't access a regular local fixed route, that the system must provide them a door-to-door service. But it's only within 3/4 of a mile of that local fixed route. And so that service is in Newburgh and in McMinnville. And then there's a general public DialARide, which doesn't serve the entire county. It's sort of a first-come, first-served basis. And it is open to any age, but I would say it's primarily used by older adults and people with disabilities. And there are quite a few group rides, which is a more efficient way to do it. I mean, they'll take a large group of folks. A large percentage of the riderships are actually clients from one of the residential housing facilities here and takes them to a work site. And so that takes up a lot of the space on that DialARide. So if just an average person calls and says, hey, I want to get a general public DialARide, a lot of times they're told that it's full and they aren't able to access it.
So let me just be clear on that. The paratransit, and who qualifies to use that?
You have to fill out an application. It's a little complicated to get into all the details, but basically the short version is that if you have a disability that prevents you from being able to ride the regular fixed route, maybe you can't get to your bus stop, maybe you actually just can't even ride the bus for whatever reason because your disability doesn't make it possible, then you fill out an application, you get certified, and if you're certified, then you are given a card, and then you're eligible for the ADA Paratransit service.
Okay, and can you give us a characterization of maybe how many rides are given per month, or a budget, or how many trips?
The ridership report that we received from First Transit puts all of the demand response numbers together. I know it's around, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but it's about 45,000 trips a year for all of the demand response.
Demand response, that includes the
That's
DialARide as
DialARide
well.
and ADA Paratransit. We don't have as many ADA Paratransit. I think that's because people probably don't really know about it, because it hasn't been marketed. And so I think that's why the numbers are probably lower for ADA Paratransit.
45,000 rides total.
Total for the demand
per year,
response.
approximately. So let me talk a little bit more about DialARide. So you say the system is operating at capacity. Often you say it's full. Is
The
that
general public DialARide, not the ADA Paratransit,
Right.
not the other services.
but still it is available, and there are many people using it. And you say sometimes will it be an individual taken from one place,
Yes,
and sometimes it'll be a group.
yes.
And how would somebody reach out to see
They
if
would
could-
call the dispatch, which is 503-474-4900, and the dispatcher, they would say they want to schedule a ride on the DialARide, and then when they would like, you usually have to call 24 hours in advance at least, and then they would schedule a ride up to 2 weeks, I think. They can go up to 2 weeks out scheduling a ride.
So if you called to maybe schedule 2 weeks out, the likelihood would be pretty good, perhaps?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
I think it would be. It may not, there's certain times of the day when the group trips go. That's when it's a challenge, but
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for the overview. John, what's been your experience as a bus rider?
Well, I would say the experience I've had is similar to the experience other people have had. It's not what you might call a user-friendly bus service. I've been on buses in a lot of other cities. If McMinnville was similar to like other cities that I've lived in, whether it be Spokane or Calgary or whatever, the bus would go into Walmart and Winco. It would go through the large strip malls like where Goodwill is and XL Gym. It would go to the front door of Lowe's and Safeway and Albertsons. In other words, it would be a good experience. You'd be able to go shopping. You'd also have Saturday service. And I know that although it goes to First Transit at the moment, the contract goes to First Transit, but we've got some more money coming from the state soon, and if there wasn't any money that had to go to First Transit, because the company has to make money, a profit. If it were operated as a nonprofit, we'd probably be able to afford this kind of expanded service. If you think about it, actually, it wouldn't cost that much more if instead of doing, say, 7 routes around McMinnville, and I'm just talking about McMinnville now, I'm not talking about the larger service. Instead of going around 7 times in a day, shall we say, you went around 6 times. It would obviously take a little longer to stop in at these stores, but it would make it stopping at the pharmacies, the banks, the stores. It would make it so much more comfortable, so much more useful.
Cynthia, you're in the midst of a survey, a study. We have professional consultants. They've heard most of what John has said. Not just from John, from other folks as well.
Right.
I know some of these things that he's saying are concerns of yours. You're trying to address them. I'd like to talk a little bit specifically about some of the things he talked about, but let's take a broader view on what is this survey, what is this study, what is this plan, how long has it been going, what's its future? Just fill us in.
So we, about shortly after I arrived, we applied for, we being the county, actually the county grants person, applied for a grant through what's called the ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation TGM program, and got funding to conduct a transit development plan, a 20-year transit development plan. It took quite a while just to get through the scoping process, but once we got it in, it actually was kicked off in February of this 2017. And we made a lot of progress. We've, over the summer, we were at, 7 events. We did over 300 rider surveys. We got 400 community surveys.
And I'd just like to say, Friends of the Bus helped you with that, didn't they?
They helped with some of the events.
And the surveys?
Yes, and some of the survey gathering. We did we did online surveys. Actually, for a system our size and considering, the limited staffing and everything, we got 700 surveys is good.
Good.
Very good. And so what we learned from that, and we did the events, we're out in front of grocery stores and, at local UFO festival and, on and on. And so it was actually kind of nice because we thought originally the timing of the program was going to be fall in the winter. We weren't going to wasn't going to be as easy to do the outreach, but the outreach was very successful. And so where we're at in the plan right now is the consultants have completed the first 2 reports, which is basically describing the system, the existing system, a draft set of goals and objectives, and all of that has been, they create that by not just the survey information and the outreach, but also from looking at all the local plans and looking at, the county plans and a lot of data-driven information. And so, what was it? You asked something else, but so where we're at now is they have just completed that first phase. They're in the phase now where they're going to be looking at, okay, here's what we heard from the public, here's what we heard from everybody that we've reached out to, and this is the kind of service people would like to have, and they're going to come up with some options and some ideas.
Did you say who they is?
I'm sorry, Nelson Nygaard and is a professional transit consulting firm, and they do thousands of transit plans all over the country, maybe even beyond the U.S. And then DKS, which is the firm that Actually, they completed the McMinnville, or the county's TSP, the Transportation System Plan. So those two consulting firms are working together. And, one interesting thing to note is that they learned that over 50% of the people that ride the system are actually going to work. And a lot of the information that came, riders' satisfaction actually is high. I mean, I have a chart. It probably will be on another local channel from the presentations that were done at the Newburgh City Council this week. But you can see that people are, actually the riders are fairly pleased with the service. So the majority of the riders think, they would like to have more service. They'd like to have Saturday service. They'd like to have more weekend service, and evening service. That came out as one of the top priorities. But
Getting home from work.
yeah, but actually people who ride it are actually pretty, obviously the obvious thing, which all of us want, is better bus stops, better marked stops, better, the buses looking better. We've had some challenges. We have an older fleet, and I've had to try to, find buses to fill in the gaps until we can get new buses ordered and online. So there's definitely things that need to be improved. And the issue of going to the front door has been brought up numerous times. And I know the consultants are looking at different ways that can be handled in their options for new service. Whether that be a shopping shuttle, whether it be the route that does go, sometimes, goes into those, but maybe not every trip. They're looking at a variety of options. And there's a committee that oversees that, and they meet January 25th, and I think that the next meeting they'll be looking at a series of, here's lots of the ideas that we're looking at, and before they finalize, and they won't really finalize, they'll also go out for another round of outreach once they come up with the various options.
The committee, the YCTA,
Yes, it's
advisory.
YCT Advisory Committee and what we call the PAC, which is the Project Advisory Committee, and basically it's the YCT Advisory Committee with some additional community members that represent various groups, such as the Latino community is represented, some folks from, representing elderly and disabled, and so it's kind of a broader group that's just for the purpose of overseeing the plan.
I hope there's going to be a chance for a lot of public input on this, not just one or two meetings, but more public input. The fact that a lot of the riders are very happy with the bus system also may that statistic may deal with the fact that you have a lot fewer riders, and many of the riders are doing these commutes to Tigard or Hillsborough, etc. And so the people who used to ride the bus, who used to be able to go to the different stores and use it as a convenience in the city itself, of course, are not on the bus, and they're not going to be part of these surveys as well. So I think that the idea of having a good local bus service that serves all of the different stores and the people, etc. I think society has proven over the years, all cities have found that this is a good, viable thing to have. And, whether what one particular survey shows is less relevant than the experience that cities in general have enjoyed as to the long-term benefits of good bus service.
I agree with you, John, that good bus service is essential to a community, and the group Friends of the Bus, it's formed, those are the folks that are the vocal ones that are fighting for that, and I think they're doing a good job.
I'd like to suggest people go to friendsofthebus.wordpress.com. WordPress is in there because we're too cheap to pay for a website, and WordPress will give it to us for nothing. Mm-hmm. So it's friendsofthebus.wordpress.com. There's places there for comments, and you can read the comments of other people on different routes, etc.
All right, very good. Speaking of comments, Cynthia, this is a card that I've seen available to bus riders. At the top it says, you can check a box: complaint, suggestion, or compliment. How's this working?
Well, I think comment cards have been part of this system for a long time, but it was a very small card, and it didn't really give us a lot of information, even to be able to, if people didn't write clearly and sometimes you couldn't figure out where the complaint was coming from and who it was directed at, or even how to contact them to follow up. So we modified it slightly and put in date and time and who's, time of day and what route and driver, and then more room for them to actually share their input. And we've just, that's fairly recent, the revamping of the look of it. And those are supposed to be on every bus and always available to customers. It's also online on the website in both Spanish and English. And there are also some at the commissioner's office and at the First Transit office too, where they can buy tickets and passes.
What kinds of things are you seeing? Are you getting compliments?
Yes, we get compliments.
Good.
Renee told me
Like
she
what-
had a stack of compliments she was going to bring over because she feels like the only thing I ever hear is the complaints.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, do it because I'd like to see them.
Yeah.
I think actually the compliments we get is a lot of people talk about, it's true in the survey, they said lots of folks felt like the drivers were very courteous and kind. I've heard the opposite as well, but I think it's, it depends, what happens during the day. And so I think we get a little bit of both in that area. Also
Suggestions?
Obviously the most common suggestion. I think the biggest problem and one of the biggest areas for complaint is this whole issue of where the bus stops are.
Wow.
So currently, if you go online, all of the bus stops are what they call GTFS coded. So they're coded with a latitude, longitude. They're actually online, but a lot of people don't go online or not able to, or it's just not something they can do. But they are there and they show where the bus stop is. But because the bus stops have not been marked, there's a lot of places where you just don't know where they are. It creates confusion, and I think it creates confusion both for the rider and for the driver. And First Transit has been struggling to keep drivers as well because it's just a lot of providers are having trouble with that right now. The pay scale isn't extremely high, and so they will train people and then lose them, and so you have some turnover. And that's been a challenge for them. And so then keeping the information current and making sure that your drivers know and are being consistent, that has been a problem. So I think that the First Transit manager and her staff are working on that, and I think they're trying to do the best that they can. Not that there's not improvement that needs to be made. I think there is. But I really believe that the bus stops and the locations of the stops and the markings, that's really the district's responsibility. It's not First Transit's responsibility. It's the district's. The district owns the transit center. We own all the buses. We lease that buses to the First Transit. First Transit maintains them and operates them, and they hire all the drivers. But really the facilities part of it, the capital part, is the district's responsibility. So, this isn't highly unusual. It's a fairly new system in a sense. It's sort of in its teen years, I would say. The county hasn't had, overseen the responsibility of it for really that long. And it takes time before it's mature and you have all of those things worked out. I agree with the Friends of the Bus that there are some things that, really should have been taken care of sooner. Part of that, I'll take the blame for the fact that I sort of took the stand because of feeling that there's not a lot of staffing and not a lot of time, that I wanted to do one big sweeping change. So we do the plan, come up with all the changes, and do it all at once. I didn't really think the plan was going to take 3 years to be finished. So that's a long time. So there's some smaller things that should have probably been done sooner. I didn't really initially push First Transit to do all those things because I just had sort of said, well, how are we really going to do this? There's sort of a lot of things you have to do once you start making changes. If you change a route, you've got to change the schedule. If you change a stop, you've got to, there's all this. So it's sort of a domino effect. And I thought, well, let's just do it all at once.
One thing I want to just make a comment on, that is, we found this in other cities. Once you put in a stop, once you put in like a cement bench and a little shelter, etc., it's very hard to change it after that. So it's very we just want to be sure that First Transit doesn't start, or the county start putting stops out on Highway 99, because then you're not going to get the bus going back into the stores or anything like that. So it's pretty important that the stops be decided upon before any construction is made.
They're probably I would guess that my educated guess is that there are going to be stops on 99 for the commuter buses. Now, the local buses, I agree with you. There's a lot of flexibility with the local routes. We could do a whole variety of things they don't have to be fixed routes. We could have more demand response. There could be more like fixed point DialARide, flexible type of service. And I actually think places like Newburgh, that's probably the logical thing to happen. Their ridership is nowhere close to what McMinnville's is. They're willing to help market it, which is nice. They mentioned that at their meeting Monday night. But even if they do that, it could be that places like Newburgh, maybe they need a different type of service. So I think there's a difference. You got to make a difference between the local service and the commuter service. If you're a commuter, you don't want to, have the bus meander around and go in front of every business on its way to Tigard, for example. So there will be stops that'll be needed on the main corridors. But local service, that's another matter. The other thing is we have to remember it's not just McMinnville. This is the Yamhill County Transit area, and it's a large area. It's got 100,000 people. It has, it's a very large area. We travel to the moon and back to the moon again every single year. It's over 700,000 miles that the buses are traveling. So it isn't just, if it was just about McMinnville, we could have the greatest system in the whole world, and you could just spend all that money in McMinnville, then great. But that's not where we're at. So you're trying to serve all of these cities the best you can with the service that works for them. And that's my goal. I actually think we all have the same goal. I really believe that what Friends of the Bus want, what I want, even what the consultants want, is you want a bus system that works for the people, that gives them the service that works for them. And I've heard loud and clear that people, I don't blame them. They don't want to walk a mile to get to the front door of Walmart, for example. And I don't want them to have to do that. But sometimes you have choices. And I think, when they made those choices in 2012, I'm not sure what the thinking was when those choices were made. But sometimes, you're compromising. I'm guessing that that was their compromise. But
Well, Cynthia, we've only got a couple minutes left. I'd like to end on some good news. Tell us about what the legislature has done for transportation.
There's, as many people probably have heard, the State Transportation Improvement Fund was passed, and they're currently in the process of figuring out all the administrative rules regarding that funding. But the good news for Yamhill County is that it will be close to $2 million. They won't start collecting it in 2018, 2019, so I don't think, it'll be coming to us till around the fiscal year 1920.
What's the current budget?
Our current budget is averages around $2 million.
So this is going to be really very significant.
Yes, it's almost a doubling of our budget. So the good news is that, I was really concerned when we started doing the plan that we were going to be creating a plan about what do we keep and what do we cut, and making people make those hard choices. Now I feel like there's going to be funding, and we'll be able to probably meet the needs and the not demands, but the desires of what folks want. This funding makes it possible. The one issue that I think we don't want to forget about is there are capital needs, and some of the capital options were taken away in the House Bill SEP 217. And so this funding will need to help us cover both capital and operating, not just
Capital new buses.
Yes, some bus, lease bus match, or some portion. Like if ever we need to build something, we're gonna have to set some money aside for future capital needs. We used to go to sources like Connect Oregon. So the transit center that's here in McMinnville was built with Connect Oregon funds. But that no longer can be used for transit after this bill.
Okay, well, I think we've just gotten a brief overview. We didn't get to a lot of the things we wanted to talk about. It's a big subject, and I think I'm going to have Rick Olson back. He's
Good
been
idea.
diving into this as a commissioner,
Yes,
has he not?
He has.
And we'll talk some more about transportation, and let's go over what we didn't
Okay.
cover so we can do it next time. John, thanks so much for being here and representing Friends of the Bus. It's been a great discussion.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.